If the edge of a cliff could talk, what would it say before you stepped off? Maybe a nervous, "You sure about this?" Maybe a sly, "Hope you packed right?" Or maybe silence, the kind that dares you to lean into thin air. Carl Boenish leaned more than anyone. He didn't just jump, he turned falling into an art form, a sport, and a calling. He's the man who named base jumping, filmed its first clean lines, and convinced a small group of skydivers to trade planes for cliffs, antennas, bridges, and skyscrapers. And in July 1984, after setting what was then billed as a world record cliff jump in Norway, he climbed back up for one more leap and never came back alive. Carl Ronald Boenish was born in 1941 in Newcastle, Pennsylvania, and had the restless curiosity of someone who wanted to know what flight felt like without a cockpit. He started out not as a daredevil, but as a cinematographer. In the late 1960s, he filmed skydivers for movies and TV. His credits included the Burt Lancaster film, The Gypsy Moths. That job gave him both technical skill and nerve. How to fall, how to see falling, how to capture it so others might understand the draw. By the late 70s, he and a few friends were experimenting with ram air parachutes, steerable canopies rather than the old round ones, and fixed object exits. In 1978, he carried cameras to the top of Yosemite's El Capitan and filmed jumps that looked insane to outsiders but were meticulously planned. Clear exits, body flight to get away from the wall, then parachutes that could actually be piloted to safe landings. Those El-Cap jumps are now considered the birth of modern BASE jumping. Carl didn't invent the idea of stepping off a cliff with a parachute. He made it systematic, documented, and in his mind, safer than the outlaw stunts that came before. He gave it a name, too. BASE stands for buildings, antennas, spans, and earth, covering every kind of fixed object you can jump from. If you've done all four, you can apply for a coveted base number, a badge in a very small and very gutsy club. Carl also gave the sport a voice. He and his wife Jean published Base Magazine, a hand-built newsletter for the tiny tribe. In it, he preached craft over chaos. Learn your exits, understand the air, practice tracking away from rock, deploy cleanly. He wanted BASE to be a discipline, not just a headline. Jean wasn't just an assistant, she was his partner in every way. They met in 1979 and quickly became a two-person manifesto. Jean had a cool, steady presence next to Carl's buzzing enthusiasm. Together they made jumps, films, and a shared life on the edge. Friends remember their dynamic as equal parts romance and research project, Carl dreaming up the next leap, Jean grounding it in calm precision. In the summer of 1984, the Boenishes traveled to Norway for a Guinness World Records television special hosted by David Frost and a young Kathy Lee Johnson, later Gifford. The location was Trollveggen, Troll Wall, the tallest vertical rock face in Europe, a soaring, dark sweep of stone beloved by climbers and feared by pilots. Carl and Jean executed a spectacular double jump there, billed as the highest base jump of its time. It was classic Boenish, spectacular yet calculated, dramatic but disciplined. Cameras rolled, the parachutes opened cleanly, and the footage promised to thrill TV audiences far from the fjords. 2 days later, Carl decided to go again. Instead of the main wall, he chose Stabben, a nearby pinnacle in the Trolltindane range. It's not entirely clear why. Maybe he wanted a slightly different line for the cameras. Maybe he trusted his feel for the wind. Maybe he simply wasn't done. Base jumpers will tell you the edge calls in a way outsiders rarely understand. It's not recklessness, it's a belief that mastery comes from repetition, but the mountains don't negotiate. On July 7, 1984, Carl launched, drifted into the wall, and was killed on impact. Newswires the next day reported it bluntly. The father of base jumping slammed into the cliff and died. What happened next still stops people cold. Jean, newly widowed and still on site, chose to jump again, not in denial, but in tribute and in defiance of fear. It was the language they'd shared for years. If grief was unbearable, flight might be the only answer. Her calm leap that day remains one of the sport's most powerful symbols. Norway reacted quickly. 2 years later, base jumping was banned on the Troll Wall, a prohibition still in place. It was an understandable response. Boenish's death was high profile, and officials wanted to prevent a rush of thrill seekers trying to imitate him. Carl's death was never seen by his community as a sign that the dream was foolish. If anything, it underlined what he had always taught, that BASE has almost no margin for error. Time and altitude are scarce, walls are close, wind is unpredictable, and the equipment gives you just seconds to fix mistakes. The sport is beautiful, but it's brutal. Even today, with wingsuits, better canopies, GPS weather tools, and thousands more jumps logged, base remains statistically one of the most dangerous recreational pursuits. Fatality lists kept by the community are long and sobering, and yet, small wins matter. Recent U.S. seasons have sometimes passed without a single base death, proof that better training and decision-making help, even if luck and physics always have a vote. Boenish's story reached new audiences through the 2014 documentary Sunshine Superman. It's part love story, part origin myth, part slow-motion tragedy. The film uses his own 16mm footage and interviews, including Gene's, to pull viewers into the thrill and the cost. You watch knowing where it ends, but it's still stunning when it comes. Critics praised the movie for showing both the giddy beauty of the sport and the danger shadowing every leap. What makes Carl's life compelling isn't just that he died doing what he loved, it's how much he built before that. He transformed a fringe stunt into a craft with shared language, best practices, and a sense of community. He filmed and published so others could learn rather than guess. He believed that if you treat the impossible like a skill to master, it can become a little less impossible. For this, he was posthumously honored by the U.S. Parachute Association and inducted into the International Skydiving Hall of Fame. Even his death left a mark. The Norwegian ban is its own kind of memorial, a sign of how visible he'd made the sport. Why did he climb back up that day? We can speculate. Artistic perfectionism, the lure of one more angle, the confidence that years of mastery bring. Or maybe there's no tidy reason. For Carl, the edge was a workshop, not a trophy stand. To stop after one great jump might have felt incomplete. Sometimes the same drive that pioneers a sport is the one that takes you too far. Base jumpers today still trace their lineage to him. They know the footage, the acronym, the first Yosemite flights. They still pass around his safety lessons, even as they design new wingsuits and tracksuits to fly farther from cliffs. They also talk about the humility his death demands, the willingness to call a jump off, to respect bad air, to let mastery include restraint. There's irony in the fact that Boenish, a man devoted to making base safer and smarter, died from the very hazard he tried to teach people to avoid, hitting the wall. But maybe it's not irony so much as proof that some pursuits will always carry risk, no matter how refined the technique. He knew that. He wrote about it. He filmed it. He lived it. If you watch him in old footage, the man practically glows. He's tall, lanky, with an infectious grin, and eyes that seem to see a frame beyond the cliff edge. He loved the technical side, calculating freefall time, testing gear, but he also loved the feeling. The instant the solid world drops away and you're purely in motion, that's hard to fake or to suppress. It explains a lot about July 7, 1984. The legacy he left is complex, a sport more organized and more dangerous than most, a culture both inspired and sobered, a love story that still moves people decades later. It's easy to paint him as either a hero or a cautionary tale. He was really both. He showed what vision and obsession can create. He also showed the cost. And that's the story of Carl Boenish, the father of base jumping, the man who turned falling into a craft and left behind a legacy as breathtaking as it is sobering. If this dive into his life and final leap kept you hanging on the edge, hit that like and subscribe. Until next time, stay curious and maybe keep both feet on the ground.